Thank you very much for attending today's press briefing by Professor Anzala. Professor Anzala is going to introduce himself to some of you who do not know him, but quite a number of you who have already joined actually know him very well. So he is going to speak to us today about the COVID-19 vaccines rollout in Africa. You know, a lot has been going on. There's quite a lot of debate in terms of their efficacy, in terms of issues to do with hesitancy, in terms of issues to do with procurements and vaccine national issues. So there's so many things, and even the age groups of people and the issues, including issues of actually some people getting vaccine again before others get it, what are the so-called the booster vaccine. So there's a lot to discuss with Prof today, and I am happy that he was able to come and give this press briefing today to members of the press. So Professor Anzala, please feel most welcome and talk to us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, so much, Daniel. I think this is the second time we are actually going through this, and I'm glad to be here. Omu Anzala, my name, and I'm a professor of virology immunology here at Kavi Institute of Clinical Research. I'm also a member of the Department of Medical Microbiology and Immunology at the university. So we teach, we research, we mentor. Actually, we do, a lot of things pertaining to infectious diseases. And just to start us off, ladies and gentlemen, just trying to understand, really what goes on in science and why as scientists and healthcare professionals, why we do the things that we do. And I think we've been here before discussing issues to do in general. Why are vaccines made? How are vaccines made? And how do vaccines work? And really, this must be completely understood because vaccines are made as an intervention into public health. And all of you are beneficiaries to vaccines. If you are totally aware, you know that smallpox went away. You know that last year, Africa was declared polio-free, and we are on the verge of actually eradicating polio. You know that complications of measles that we used to see in terms of central nervous complications, you don't see them again because of vaccines. You are actually aware that yesterday there was a real big announcement about malaria vaccines. And just as a note, malaria vaccine research has been going on for the last 100 years. And it's only in the last 5 years that the global community has actually realized a malaria vaccine. So really, the reason why vaccines are made should be very, very clear. It's a public health intervention that is actually very, very critical. And then how vaccines are made, we might not go into that, but really it requires that we understand the infectious agent clearly, how it is transmitted, how it is in terms of its structure, and then we also understand the host of how it infects, and bringing those together in terms of understanding the natural history. And then lastly, how do vaccines work? Things that we have discussed before in terms of how we test the vaccine once they have actually been designed, and usually the areas of going through animal studies, looking at safety in animal studies, looking at efficacy and protection, moving it into humans, going through first in human in terms of efficacy, then going through phase 2 to look at dosage and routes of administration. And then finally, if all those things go well, going into phase 3 to begin to look at efficacy and whether the vaccine will actually work and protect as it is required. And then finally, phase 4, where we move the vaccine into the real world. And to us, And to a large extent, as bad as COVID is, COVID has also given us an opportunity to realize a vaccine very, very quickly. And this is because of the previous work that has been done looking at other viruses and harnessing that technology to quickly make a COVID vaccine, but also the fact that the natural history of COVID revealed itself very, very quickly in terms of those who get infected, those who recover, and when they recover, what are the correlates of protection? So those are actually the things that led to an expedited movement, and that is what brought the COVID vaccine very, very quickly. Because everybody has been talking, oh, it takes 10 years. Yes, it takes 10 years. Malaria took 100 years. Or people say, yes, it takes 10 years. We don't have an HIV vaccine, and we've been looking for it for the last 40 years. So it is not so much the time, it is so much understanding the infectious agent and understanding the host and bringing these two together to understand the correlates of protection. So the next thing is that having had a COVID vaccine, how does it work? And this cartoon clearly illustrates what we want to do. A vaccine can either be designed to prevent infection, meaning that if we have a COVID vaccine that prevents infection, it will mean that you don't get infected with COVID at all. And it will work, it will work at the very first stage of exposure. If it doesn't work here, then the next thing is that, can we then have a vaccine that prevents disease? So that even if you get infected, you don't end up with disease, you don't end up in hospital at all. And then even if you get disease, the vaccine can also prevent severe disease, hospitalization. And eventually the vaccine should also be able to prevent you from death. So the design of the COVID vaccine is that to a small extent, it prevents infection. But to a large extent, it prevents disease, and it also prevents hospitalization, and it also prevents severe disease, and to some extent, it also prevents death. So really, having understood that the current COVID vaccines to some extent prevent infection, but to a large extent prevent disease, we are actually saying that for now, we have an addition to the non-pharmaceutical interventions, an addition that can actually lead us to ensuring that we don't suffer the problems of COVID. And now, to let you know, because there's been a lot of discussion about the platforms that the COVID vaccines are developed using new platforms, that is true, but these are totally not new. For example, the traditional vaccines that most of us have benefited from are vaccines we call live attenuated, like the measles vaccine, the BCG vaccine for TB. We have quite a number of inactivated ones like hepatitis B, proteins, we have peptides, we have toxoids. But the emerging platforms that now we are talking about are nucleic acids. This is the RNA, DNA, and the viral vectors. These are vectors that we used to develop peptides, and then virus-like particles, for example, the human papilloma virus that is currently in circulation, and the lipid nanoparticles, where you actually, after making the mRNA, you cannot administer a naked mRNA. You have to put it in a vehicle, and usually it is packaged within the lipid particles. But these platforms, ladies and gentlemen, are not new. We tested here at CAVI the first DNA vaccine in 2001, meaning that these platforms were already available. The only difficulty was that they were safe, but the packaging was a bit of a problem because DNA and RNA are easily digested by DNases or RNases, enzymes in the environment that occur. So what has helped over the years is to find out how these platforms can be made stable so they can deliver our antigens of interest. And that has been happening. So although the science was not talking about it, but this innovation have been there for the last 15, 20 years. And at least COVID helped us move ahead, because part of it is that at that time that COVID was starting, making this platform stable for them to be used as vaccine, that technology had actually arrived. So these are the various platforms. And we know that as we go ahead, you'll actually hear more and more vaccines are being developed using these new platforms, especially the mRNA and the DNA platforms. And then currently, these are the vaccines. Although these vaccines are in emergency use authorization, majority of them are beginning to finish phase 3. Majority of them are beginning to ask for full licensure. But these are the current vaccines that we know of that are moving, but there are so many other vaccines in phase 1, phase 2. But these 8 are the ones that are on the lead: the Pfizer, the Moderna, the AstraZeneca, Sputnik, the Sinovac, the biologicals, the one they are calling the Casino, the Nanovax, and the J&J. These are really the front runners. And these vaccines are now currently in use in various countries here and there. And depending on where you are, you'll actually find that there is a mixture of 1 or 2 of these vaccines. Now, coming to the rollout, gentlemen, let me start by maybe speaking about Kenya, because that's where I belong. We have a population of 53 million individuals in this country. The African continent is hovering around 1.3 billion individuals. Globally, we have 7.8 billion individuals. So what we are embarking on in terms of vaccinating the global community is the largest ever vaccine drive we have ever seen, those of us who are alive now. Most vaccines have been confined to the under 5s, which usually constitutes maybe a very smaller population of maybe 1 million or so in this country. But you can actually see that we are talking of vaccinating close to 6 to 7 billion individuals globally. It is a totally large undertaking, which requires a lot of planning and which requires a lot of funding. Now, as of this October, 6.4 billion doses of COVID vaccine have been administered globally, 6.7 billion. As of October, the data coming through is showing that 23 million doses are being administered globally each day. And then 46% of the world population has received at least 1 dose of the COVID vaccine. If you want to check your own country data, I'm sure that is completely available. And for those who are in Kenya, you only need to call the Ministry of Health, and they will actually give you our local data. But this is the global data as of maybe today or yesterday. Now, when you look at the rollout in Africa, in terms of daily COVID vaccine doses administered, you can actually see that beginning January, there was an upward trend, and this trend has been going on. We peaked where we were giving maybe 1.5 million doses on a daily basis, but then this has actually also dropped drastically. South Africa is there trying. The other countries I really didn't want to show are way, way, way down here, clearly showing us that our rollout in Africa is not doing that well, all right? And then if you look at where we are in Africa as of October 5th, take into account that the population of Africa is 1.3 billion individuals. So far, as of October 5th, Africa has actually vaccinated only 60 million individuals. 60 million individuals, looking at a population of 1.3 billion individuals. So we must begin to ask ourselves, really, what do we need to do to ensure that we up these figures? How many individuals do we need to be able to vaccinate? But take into account this figure, which actually shows you the trend of daily vaccinations, where the trend should actually be going up, but you can even see in South Africa, it is flattening. So on the African continent, ladies and gentlemen, we really have. Yeah. Now, if you look at Africa again, in terms of countries on track to achieve 40% of their population vaccinated by the end of this year, and we are saying 2020, only 2 countries in Africa are on track, and that is Morocco and Tunisia. The rest of us, by December, we shall not be anywhere near vaccinating 40% of our population. So again, ladies and gentlemen, on our continent, we really have a problem. And the issue is that what can we do as a population? And then if you just share again, in terms of looking at these numbers, you can see countries like Chile, countries like Spain, countries like Canada, United Kingdom. These guys are into their 70s and over in terms of vaccinating their population. And no wonder majority of these countries are beginning to open their economies so that they are now beginning to deal with the COVID as an endemic problem, so that they can be able to vaccinate, use all the other aspects, but be able to ensure that majority of the populations are vaccinated. Down here is where you actually see Africa. You can see we are hovering only about 5.4%. Kenya is here, we are offering about 5.4%. So really, we have a real huge problem. And this data, if you just go to our world in data, you can actually see what is happening on a daily basis as far as SARS-CoV vaccinations are concerned. And these are the various doses that have been vaccinated globally. So you can actually see that the vaccine that has been administered the most in Europe and North America, and it's now beginning to trickle into Africa, is Pfizer, and then it's followed by Moderna. And then you have the Oxford AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, the Sputnik vaccine, and the Sinopharm vaccine from Beijing. So these are actually the leading candidates that are now being administered globally. And this is as of October, of 4th of October, 2021. Now, what are the emerging lessons that we have actually learned since last year and since this vaccine rollout actually started? One of the emerging lessons is planning and preparation. What Europe did and North America is, and maybe even China, is when they saw the glimmer of hope that COVID vaccines were going to work, they quickly started planning and preparing patches. And some of these countries even purchased and put money together to start purchasing doses even before these vaccines reached phase 3, because they could see a glimmer of hope, and their scientists were advising them these vaccines are going to work. This is going to be a global issue. So there'll be going to be issues of production. So the earlier you prepare yourself and the earlier you put money together to start buying these doses, the better. And that's why these countries, that's what they need. The other issue is funding. Funding, because vaccines don't come cheap, and vaccines are also not easy to make. So again, we are suffering the problem of funding in Africa. We didn't plan well, we didn't prepare well. Even if we did, we should have thought of also putting money together to start pre-ordering these vaccines, even before they reached phase 3. And the other issue is the status of existing healthcare systems. Even once you have the vaccine, do you have a well public health system to actually be able to deliver these vaccines to the end user, to that person in the remotest corner, but having the logistics of the cold chain? So these are the emerging issues. And they are emerging because we have been accustomed to giving vaccines to children and we are never accustomed to giving vaccines to adults. So this was totally a new ballgame. So how do we ensure that we use the existing healthcare system to the best of us? And then the other issue was strategic and early communication, engaging with communities, because adults are not used to vaccines. They take children to the vaccine. But here now we are saying that we want to be able to give adults vaccination. So strategic and early communication is critical and must continue. And then bringing in the whole issue of partnerships, bringing in issues of the private sector. I don't know how well Africa is coordinated, but we cannot leave COVID vaccine delivery to the public sector alone. The private sector must come in one way or the other to actually work in combination with the public sector, and to ensure that we can move and move very, very quickly. You have actually just seen the kind of numbers that I've shown you. As of October, only 60 million Africans against a population of 1.4 billion individuals. And then the other thing is issues of risk and challenges. With COVID came misinformation. And not only that, it's also the era of digital communication. So the whole issue of vaccine skepticism, hesitancy, and also the issues of duration of coverage. So these are emerging issues that we must continue to deal with on a very regular basis to ensure that we can up our numbers. Then the other emerging issues that as scientists to some extent we knew, but COVID threw this at us very, very quickly. And the emerging of SARS-CoV variants, variants of concern and variants of interest. Although we knew coronaviruses, we knew this from the animal coronaviruses, that these viruses are prone to variants. How quickly the variants emerged was also unprecedented. But that, again, these were emerging issues. And then the global supply chain, just very large populations. So that to make vaccines for 7.8 billion individuals globally, distribution within, globally, but distribution within countries, storage and cold chain. You are aware with mRNA vaccines, issues of cold chain storage at -80 or -20, but those are actually now being resolved as we go ahead. And then the other emerging lesson is that we are administering this vaccine in the midst of an outbreak. So studies have been done to look at safety. Emergency authorization has been done. Phase 3 is ongoing, but we are already in phase 4. So pharmacovigilance now becomes a critical issue, looking at side effects on the larger population. And this must continue because this then must be fed back to the scientists and to the community to understand exactly those issues. And one of the emerging issues there was the clotting issues that we actually saw as these issues began. And then there was the issue of, was the vaccine made too quick? But I've explained that this technology has been around for 15, 20 years, only that maybe it was not common to the general public. So there was an element of expedited vaccine research where approvals, but where phase 1 and phase 2 were going in parallel. But this was informed because we needed answers to ensure that we can deal with COVID as quickly as possible. And then other emerging issues is an administration of SARS-CoV-2 now in pregnant women and children, realizing that we only did clinical trials in those who are 18 and above. But now the question is being asked of us, is this vaccine safe in pregnant women? The answer is yes. Is this vaccine safe in children? To a large extent, the answer is yes. But we need answers and we need to move, because you'll actually realize that countries like Cuba are beginning to vaccinate children. And then now another emerging issue is the need of boosters. So you can see that, as they say, I don't know whether it's a French saying or an English saying, that we are building the ship as we say. And this is some of the lessons actually we are learning. These are the variants that are currently, that have come forth. The alpha, the beta, the delta, the gamma, the eta, the lota, and the epsilon. One of the things as scientists we want to be able to appreciate is that what is the circulation of these variants in the various communities we have. Is alpha circulating in our community at the same time as beta? Is delta circulating in our community at the same time as gamma? And what does it really mean as we move ahead? So we cannot afford to just say we are rolling out vaccines. We must roll out vaccines, but continue with very active research to really understand how these variants are mixing out there in the various communities, because these must be fed back to the scientists in order to make the next generation of COVID vaccine. And then the emerging issue of vaccine skeptics and vaccine hesitancy. I have never seen issues that we have confronted where really well-educated, well-informed individuals are very skeptical of vaccines and are very hesitant of vaccines. And it is cutting across the spectrum, all right? And these are some of what we hear. Will I get sick after getting the vaccine? What are the risks? Why are vaccines necessary for everyone? Are vaccines safe? Are vaccines going to cause infertility? So these are the things we are hearing. But really, ladies and gentlemen, you are all beneficiaries of vaccines I've mentioned here. I am sure all of you have received a polio vaccine. All of you have received a measles vaccine. All of you have actually received a BCG vaccine. And you have also, those who have children, you have also taken your children for this vaccination. And those who are slightly better than majority of us even go for what they call baby-friendly vaccines, all right? Because you know vaccines are safe. So why should we turn around and start questioning COVID vaccine that has been made just the same way? So what we need is to really communicate, but ensure that we also communicate what is correct, but also going to the right size, because the right information is actually available. Vaccines are completely safe. Then the issue is promotive and preventive. What we have in our arsenal at this point in time, we must continue masking. We must continue with social distance. We must continue with sanitation. We must continue with isolation for those who have COVID. But above it all, ladies and gentlemen, we must encourage all of us to go for vaccination. So the question I'm posing to all of you, because you in the fifth estate have ability to communicate all this, what is it going to take to eliminate SARS-CoV-2 virus? We must eliminate the virus, all right? What is it actually going to take? So the promotive and the preventive toolkit we have is available. And if we are going to say that we want to open up economy, these things must be completely in place. And we ensure that above it all, most of us are vaccinated. Then The whole issue is that how do we ensure that we increase the uptake? There are two measures that we can actually use. One measure is public health intervention. Give information, educate the citizenship, promote and ensure we give preventive approaches. And that's exactly what we do. Vaccines are available. Hand washing is something you can do very easily. Social distancing is something you can do, very easily. Masking should not even be an issue. And above all, vaccines are available and they are free. The other public health measure could be incentives, social or financial. And if public health interventions don't work, then maybe the other strategy could be legal interventions. The way they said in some countries that it is mandatory. Here, not too long ago in Kenya, teachers were told it is mandatory to get a COVID vaccine. And the other legal issue is that maybe vaccine certificates, that you cannot travel, you cannot go to public places without vaccines. And that's what, for example, France did. France said hotels are open, restaurants are open, going to watch your best game is open, but so long as you show what? A COVID certificate. So this is the discussions we must really have, ladies and gentlemen. And I hear many people saying, oh, let us open the economy. Yes, the economy should be open. But at the same time, these measures must be in place. COVID has actually not gone out. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.